Welcome to Money Mavericks and Mayhem, the podcast where finance meets audacity in a whirlwind of insight and excitement. Join hosts Adri Blyer and Ryan Duchak as they bring you closer to the stories of risk takers, rule breakers, and boundary pushers who are reshaping the financial landscape. Perfect for seasoned investors, budding entrepreneurs, or anyone curious about the tumultuous world of money. This is Money Mavericks and Mayhem.
Welcome back to Money Mavericks and Mayhem, the podcast where we explore the stories of financial innovation, intrigue, and occasional chaos. I'm Adri Blyer.
And I'm Ryan Duchak. In today's episode, we're diving into the pioneering work of Adam Smith, breaking down the fundamentals of supply and demand and uncovering the bizarre Great Garlic price hike in China. Adri, let's get into it.
Sounds good, Ryan. So Adam Smith, often hailed as the father of economics. So what can you tell us, about his background and why his work is still so influential today?
All right. Well, Adam Smith was a Scottish economist and philosopher.
Wait. Can you do a Scottish accent while you're doing this?
You do not want me to do that.
Tried.
I can't even. I'll attempt to sound like an Irishman, I guess. And, no. Just no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that one. I am not good with accents.
Me neither.
But Adam, I can tell you about Adam Smith. How about that one instead?
That'll work.
All right. So he was best known for his seminal work, which was called The Wealth of Nations, and that was published in 1776. In this book, Smith laid out the foundation for classical economics, introducing concepts like the division of labor, productivity, and most notably probably the invisible hand of the market. In his work, it emphasized the idea that individuals seek their own self-interests, inadvertently contribute to the greater good of society through market mechanisms, basically. Smith's work remains very influential because it's fundamentally shaped our understanding of free markets and capitalism. His principles really underpin modern economic theory and policy, which makes him one of the most important figures in economic history, I would argue.
Yeah, no, I think it's fascinating that his ideas really have stood the test of time, right? I mean, we're kind of living it now. Things may have gotten a little bit out of control from where he stood, but what was some of the core principles that he introduced in The Wealth of Nations?
There were several groundbreaking concepts, Adri, that he introduced. A few of the most important ones, I would say, the division of labor, which Smith argued that dividing production into specialized tasks increases efficiency and productivity. He famously used the example of a pin factory to illustrate how specialization allows workers to produce far more pins collectively than if each worked alone. So do what you're good at and do that repeatedly, as opposed to being mediocre at a lot of different tasks is the way to get efficiency, is basically what he's saying with the division of labor concept. Now, the invisible hand concept is one where individuals pursuing their own economic interests unintentionally contribute to the greater good through market mechanisms, which this idea really promotes the efficiency of free markets, which free markets is probably his next best concept, which Smith advocated for minimal government intervention in economic affairs. He argued that markets should be left to operate freely as competition leads to better outcomes for consumers and society. And then the last one is self-interest in competition, which Smith believed that self-interest drives economic activity, and competition ensures that fair prices and quality goods. All of those really form the bedrock of classical economics and continue to influence economic thinking today. And you mentioned we've gotten away from it a little bit, and I kind of disagree that it still exists. It has morphed and changed, but all of those principles really do exist as long as the markets are able to work freely. All of this would and will continue on as long as the competition isn't colluding with each other to keep prices high. Then you will have that competition to keep prices as low as they can be, because each company wants to succeed. Does that make
Right.
sense?
It does make sense, and I agree with you from that point. I think what I was trying to illustrate is a question that I have coming up, but from Smith's principles, especially when you're talking about the government, and when you kind of said about, if companies don't artificially inflate prices for their own benefit and try to squeeze the smaller companies out, where we look today and I go, oh, maybe we get away from this a little bit is perhaps, I'm not pointing any fingers, I'm not saying it's true, but is there potential market manipulation directly from the government? And another part of it, in maybe Smith didn't say this exactly, but what's government's role from allowing corporations to get too big? I mean, we have monopoly laws, but what I'm watching today is these conglomerates, and you're saying, well, okay, are you really a monopoly? But they're buying up all the small businesses and then make it very difficult for a startup or anybody that is not part of those conglomerates to really compete in a lot of ways. And one of the things that I think of is, obviously I like a smaller government, and they shouldn't be interfering necessarily directly with markets. But from a regulatory standpoint, that's to me is where that they need to kind of step up and say, hold up, we have to have equal playing fields here, because it only really works in free market capitalism. And my thought is, okay, are we really in a free market today? I think the fundamentals are still absolutely 100% correct, but where have we become? So that leads to, kind of talking about Smith. Obviously he emphasizes that self-interest and competition, which is great. I do agree with all of that. And that's the groundwork for modern capitalism. Talking about the government, how did he view that role of government in the economy?
I got you. Well, first, you look a little young for being born in 1723, because you pretty much just outlined his viewpoint as well.
Right.
He acknowledged a limited but essential role for government. It wasn't, we don't need government involved in this. He believed that the government should provide public goods like national defense, justice, and infrastructure, things that markets wouldn't naturally provide efficiently.
Mhm.
And he also recognized the importance of regulating monopolies and ensuring fair competition. Now, with that said, he was generally speaking very skeptical of government intervention. So that's why I said you pretty much just outlined it. He argued that it can distort markets and hinder economic growth. Now, that pretty much laid out exactly what you said of, we need you involved in some aspects, from the regulatory to limit those monopolies and make sure that competition stays fair. Don't let them collude, don't let them buy up or create massive, and you're always going to have barriers to entry for new
Sure.
businesses. But to pick on a company like Amazon, where the barrier that they have created is the shipping efficiencies. So if I want to become a retail store and open today and sell products online, it is very challenging to compete with Amazon because of their behemoth size. they have economies of scale that can really limit my ability to get into that. And that's where Smith was kind of arguing for the government to step in there, limit that type of stuff, the public services, the public goods, like I mentioned, national defense. Obviously, it would be incredibly challenging to privatize the military.
Absolutely.
In theory, it would be possible.
Probably not
That
a great idea. Yeah.
probably not a great idea. It might be the understatement of your day. Pretty bad idea. So that's where the government rule really was focused on by Smith. Now, personally, I feel his nuanced view of government involvement still remains very relevant in today's debates over economic policy, and that's some of the consternation that's going on right now with our citizens viewing our government. You're stepping in too much. I don't I hesitate to use the word manipulating, but your involvement, whether intentional or not, is manipulating the free market system and really making it very difficult to argue that there is no manipulation involved in our markets currently, whether that's stock markets or business markets in general, based on all of the government's actions.
I know you're trying to look for another word besides manipulation. You did a pretty good job.
It, I mean, manipulation, it's such a strong word,
It's a
and
strong word.
it just alludes to nefarious
You're right.
intent, which I'm not saying that's what is happening or not, quite frankly. I'm not going to pick one side of that argument, but I think it's very easy to say that the level of government involvement in everything that we have is not lining up appropriately. Where, personally speaking, I would love the government involvement inside of the FDA to be a lot stronger. That's where, to me, regulation is important. What companies are allowed to put in the food that they provide for us to purchase. That, I think, should be heavily regulated
Absolutely.
with all the technology, the chemistry involved. I mean, I saw at a big box food or big box store chicken. It was pre-packaged chicken. It was air sealed, all that fun stuff. It was pre-cooked. So all you had to do was heat and serve. It lasted for over a month from when it was on the shelf. It did not expire for over a month. Now, I am not an expert in this, but I know if I grill some chicken breast on my grill, even if I air seal that after or put it in packaging and seal that packaging, that will not last a month without growing whatever
Yeah.
funky things grow on it. So what are they putting in that to allow that to stay good for that long? I have to assume that's not healthy for us.
Of course
Um,
not.
it's an assumption. Again, I'm not in that. That's not my expertise. So that's purely my assumption. And that's where I personally would love our government to step in and say, no, that's not okay. Reading about some ingredients that have been banned in Europe for decades that is still perfectly suitable banned because it's been excuse me, it's been proven to cause cancer or have cancer causing properties to it. Why is that still legal for companies to put into our food in America? Whereas the government stepping in and regulating and making the red tape to start a new business so overly intensive that people just won't do it because there's such a high cost, there's permitting, all of that fun stuff. That's where they can take a step back, in my opinion, in
Oh,
places like that.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many places where you go, why questions that we have, and that leads to a distrust of the government, right? So to your point about the carcinogens in the food, we know this, right? But a lot of people that you talk to, whether they're not educated on it, don't care, whatever that situation is, I don't know, but it just shouldn't be allowed because somebody will say, well, I had a hamburger or something. Well, a hamburger from McDonald's is not really a hamburger, right? I mean,
That's
what
different
is
from grinding up a cow at your local butcher.
Yeah, it's completely different. So the quality, it's completely different. And to your point about Europe banning a lot of these additives or whatever they are, our government should be doing the same. Now the question becomes, why aren't they? Right? Is it the lobbyists? And same thing with the drug companies. Should there be advertisements for drugs? Of course not. But if the system is good, the doctors would know, and that's a whole different conversation. But the pushing of drugs that we have in this country is out of control, and that's where the government should come in. And here's the problem that I then view with something like Adam Smith's, where we look at the fundamentals and you say, you're absolutely right. But where does this start to break down? And I don't know if it's a conspiracy, but my thoughts goes to, well, could all of these fundamentals start to break down with greed? And humans across, I mean, you look throughout history, greed always kind of rises to the top. Now, who do you have who's being paid? How do politicians, I mean, we can go down this road for hours, but how do politicians go into public government and come out with, hundreds of millions of dollars in assets? It doesn't make sense, and that should not be fair. Then on the small business side, and you're absolutely right. There's always red tape and there's always competition, and competition is great. And it makes it difficult, but that's the excitement of kind of creating your own business, right? Can compete? But just look at tax nexus for shipping, for e-commerce
Oh,
shipping,
yeah,
right?
the
I mean,
state laws now.
the state laws, and it's all the
Ooh.
same whether you're Amazon or you're $1 million small business. You have the same regulations, and you've got Amazon that has a team of lawyers. But if you're a small business with 7 employees, you have the same regulations. It makes no sense, right?
Well, and
So
then I forget you might know. I forget the crossover points, but what Adri is referring to is if you sell goods online. So the example I'll give is we are domiciled in Pennsylvania. If we list goods for sale in the state of Ohio, California, any other state than Pennsylvania, and you might know the crossover point. Is it like $500 worth of
no,
sale?
so if you're shipping so if you have Nexus in, let's say, Pennsylvania, and you start shipping, let's say you've got a client in California, and it changes all the time. Here's the problem. So it was 500,000 at one point. I'm not saying that was definitely for California. Every state is different. And then it's also an amount of product. So it's, and again, I'm making, it's 1,000 products or $500,000 worth of goods. But so it was 500,000, then they dropped it to 250,000. Now they're talking about dropping it less. So all of a sudden, now you have to have Nexus. If you cross that threshold, you have to register with, we're talking about California. You have to then register with California as you have a business in California for them to collect the taxes, right? Okay, I get state taxes. I mean, we're taxed incredibly amount, anyway, but why would a small business it's just trying a lot of these businesses don't have Nexus in all 50 states like an Amazon would, right? So now you have to watch this thing, and as soon as you cross that threshold, you now have to spend the money to register in that. Even though you don't have a location there, you now have to have Nexus in that state and do your state taxes for that state. And it's unbelievable that a small, so there should be, hey, if you're I'm making it up, right? But if your revenue, once your revenue crosses, $50 million, now you become a different class of business, and now you follow these Nexus rules. But why would a small company that's maybe doing 1 million or hundreds of thousands or a couple $1 million in revenue have the same regulations that almost $1 trillion company has? It makes no sense, and that's where the government needs to step in and say, "Hey, no, states, we understand taxes, And I don't, our government right now, I don't think is going to do this, but that's where I think Adam Smith is saying, okay, have your nuanced view of government oversight and don't overstep your boundaries. Keep the markets free and open, and let competition or make competition more fair across all economic businesses, from a size standpoint.
Yeah,
And
how do you compete with Amazon, a Home Depot, whatever it may be? 500,000 is not that high of an amount, or 1,000 goods, whatever it may be. 250,000 worth of sales. Relatively speaking, to your point of a 7-person company, that's a full-time job understanding the laws and regulations of each individual state.
mhm,
There's 50 of them. And I
yep,
don't know if the territories are involved in this too, but that is a full-time job. And if you have an Etsy shop, hits it nicely, and you've got a good product where you're a single person producing something, selling on Etsy, and somebody wants 1,000 of the trinkets that you make, even if they're $1 a piece, that's only $1,000 that you're selling. You now have to register in that state and file tax returns. That is beyond. When you start a business, it should be challenging to succeed.
and
Nothing good is easy. As simple as that. I like the challenge of it. That's a good thing. However, that goes beyond challenging. That is a giant brick wall that's being built right in front of you as you're trying to get in.
it, it's
That,
stifling competition.
yeah,
And it all came from a big company called Wayfair. You're probably familiar with Wayfair. They did
yep,
a lawsuit, and you go, well, what? Okay, this, and I understand the taxation. The states want their tax. I get it. I mean, I'm not one of these people that think all tax is theft, but where we are, when you're all in taxes over 50% of your income, depending where you are, so forth and so on, it's it gets to be stifling. Then you're a business just trying to get by, right? Just a lot of these small business owners, I talk about this all the time. People look at a business owner and they think that they're automatically wealthy because you own a business. Most business owners might make a decent living, but most are not multi-millionaires, and certainly not billionaires. And so they're making an okay living. And it was the same conversation I had with people about the minimum wage, right? And saying, okay, I do agree that companies should not take advantage of their employees and they should pay them what they're worth. I agree with that 100%. But what people always forget is minimum wage is minimum wage. If you raise that up to 15%, nothing changes, right? The
yeah,
economy, it adjusts for it. You can see that now, because although the minimum wage, quote unquote, didn't increase, there was enough pressure to say, okay, we need to start paying our employees $15 an hour, which most people cannot really afford. And then what happened to the people that are making the minimum wage that went from $8 an hour to 15? They can't afford anything more now anyway, because the price of goods go up. It's all connected. You're not going to the poor the least paid people are always going to be the least paid people, and they're going to be able to purchase the minimum amount of stuff. Just
yes.
because if you raise that whole group up to $100 an hour, it's irrelevant. You're going to get about 4 months of, well, look, I'm doing pretty well. It's all going to catch up, and all you're doing is squeezing out the middle, right?
Yeah,
And I know
absolutely.
that seems to be the area that our country kind of wants to go, but that's something we need to fight back in, and we should have these conversations. I have to get off of my little pedestal, because I'm
Well,
very passionate about it, and I think it's horseshit.
it is. My whole thing is solve the problem, not put a band-aid over it.
Hmm.
And that's with this nexus thing. I'm okay with states receiving tax revenue for goods that are sold to people in their state. I'm
Sure.
fine with that. The solution that they came up with, I am not fine with. Figure out a different process. The federal government can come in and say, okay, if the states want to collect revenue on this, that's fine. They all have to band together, use some of this tax revenue that they have to create a software system, a program, whatever it may be, that makes it more simplistic for companies to report those earnings and pay those taxes. Instead of having a full-time staff to figure out each individual state's rules, requirements, and regulations, plug that all into a system or make all states have equal rules and regulations so it's a level playing field, and then everything's calculated for that small business owner. Something,
Yeah.
and again, I don't
And
know what that solution is,
yeah, I
but
mean,
the
they
one
do
they
have
came
that,
up with
you know,
isn't it.
right. And they have those softwares and you pay an arm and a leg for it. Right.
Well,
So it's
that's why they have those softwares make the states band together to create it,
create a
not
free
a
software that's
separate
accessible to
company.
everybody. Yeah, because
Exactly.
yeah, I'm not going to even name it, and I swear that those companies are involved with all of this, and they're like, yes, because that's their business. I'm with you.
Yeah, they're
That's
making a killing from it.
they're
I'm
making a
sure they're
killing because it is very
lobbying, saying,
expensive,
yes,
and
let's do this.
yeah, we deal
And,
with it, and you go, oh, okay, you're just
and by
tracking
the
it,
way,
and
we've created a wonderful solution for all of your businesses to use.
it only costs you $5,000 a year.
Yeah,
You know,
it it's
as a small business, if
it's
you're
a
larger, it's
blanket.
cost way more. But
Yeah. Let's move on. We keep
yeah,
digressing.
we could be here forever. Absolutely. So
Let's
when
move
we
on
get
from
back,
Adam.
yeah, let's move on from Adam. But when we get back, let's talk about the economics of supply and demand. Sound good?
Yeah.
Perfect. Struggling to wake up refreshed to tackle your busy day? Introduce Nolapelli to your bedtime routine. Their innovative bedding and sleep masks work in sync with your body for a deeper, more restorative sleep. Made right here in the USA from advanced performance fabrics, Nolapelli products balance moisture and regulate temperature so you wake up looking and feeling ready to conquer whatever the day throws at you. Invest in better sleep and better mornings with Nolapelli. Use code MONEY15 for 15% off your first purchase, because the path to success starts with waking up on the right side of the bed. Nolapelli is not affiliated with LPL Financial or the Monteverdi Group.
And we're back. All right, Adri, let's hit a interesting theory, the economics of supply and demand, which are the fundamental concepts of economics, but still can be very confusing, especially today. So can you break down what supply and demand mean and how they interact in the market?
Yes. I mean, trying to do this basics. Let's go like kind of
Yeah.
basics, right? So, okay, we got supply, right? So think about the quantity of goods or services that a producer of goods or services are willing and able to sell at various prices over certain period of time, right? So typically the higher the price, the more suppliers are willing to produce. To your point about Etsy and you have $1, you're selling things for $1. Well, if you're selling that for $100 and you have a market for it, that's more profitable and makes more sense, right? So then you have demand. Now that is the quantity of goods or services that consumers, not producers, that consumers like us are willing and able to buy at various prices, right? So generally, then we have the lower the price, the more the consumers are willing to buy. So you have this kind of discrepancy to say, or there's a, I shouldn't say discrepancy, but you're looking for that sweet spot. If you're a business producing, you don't want to be too high because the demand may not be there, and you don't want to be necessarily too low because then you're looked at as too cheap and people don't want you there. So it's that supply and demand. What can I produce at what price that people are willing to buy it? Is that pretty basic?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So then we have the law of demand. So as the prices of a good or service decreases, the quantity demanded increases, and vice versa. So again, that if look at TVs. That's a great example. With TVs, flat screen TVs, at one point, I mean, I'm older. When they first came out, those plasma TVs were like $20,000 or whatever they were. Now you can buy a 85-inch TV from Sam's Club for $500, right?
Yeah.
So every single person it has a giant flat screen TV now, whereas even probably 10 to maybe 15, definitely 20 years ago, that was a huge luxury, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of to outline the law of demand. Then you have the law of supply, right? So as the price of goods increases, the quantity supplied increases and vice versa. So the interaction of supply and demand, again, just determines that equilibrium, I guess, price where the quantity supplied equals the quantity demanded. So that's where, as a company, that's what you want to have, is that really sweet spot. Sometimes you, like I just heard about this with Apple. I don't know if it's true. It was just more of a headline that I read, but that they have that virtual reality thing now,
Mhm.
Vision
Yeah.
Pro or whatever, and apparently they produce way too much of them because the thing is like $4,500. So although it's very cool, I mean, if you've never, if you can go to an Apple store and they give you like a 15-minute demo, which I did one day, it was very cool, but it's
Not
$4,500.
$4,500. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, if that was 500, maybe even under
I'll
1,000, you probably have a way different market here. But who's going to pay $4,500 for? I think it seems like it's very cool and it's going in a very direction, but right now it's kind of a toy, right? So it's
Yeah,
very
it's a
expensive,
video
and
game
yes,
system to an extent. Like,
yeah, yeah. And I mean, hopefully they'll get there because it is incredible to. Yeah, I would recommend anybody go check it out if you're into tech and that kind of thing. But there's just you see that a lot of times. So does that make sense for the basics? Was that basic enough for supply and demand?
yeah, it does. And I'm
Yeah.
going to wait to get on my tangent until you get through all of this. So that part makes sense.
Okay.
Now, how do changes in supply or demand affect the prices and that equilibrium that you mentioned?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, from an increase in demand, right? So if demand increases while supply chains remain constant, right? So we're not increasing supply, the demand curve then shifts, which would result in a lower equilibrium price and quantity. So an increase in supply, then conversely, if the supply increases while demand remains constant, the supply curves shift the other way, causing lower equilibrium price and higher quantity, right? So now we have too many goods and not enough people to buy them. So what do we have to do?
Drop
It's,
the price.
time for a sale, right?
So what
Kind
you're
of.
saying, that Apple example then, where with the headsets, they made too many, there's not enough demand, so in order to hit equilibrium, instead of 4,500, and I'm just making this up, if those go on sale to 2,200, that demand is going to increase,
Likely,
and
if you get to
for the
that right
people will start
equilibrium.
purchasing
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
if
so
22 is the right price. Yeah.
if it was the right price, yeah. So once you can hit that equilibrium, but from a supply standpoint, there's costs for manufacturing. So if you don't, you're not really doing your research or just miss the mark, all of a sudden you're stuck with all these goods that you have to offload and perhaps even take a loss if you can't get rid of them, right? So
Mhm.
then you have decrease in supply, right? So if the supply decreases, well, demand remains constant, right? So everybody kind of wants this thing, but we don't have enough supply. What happens? Then we lead to a higher price and lower quantity. So now everybody wants what you have, and you just don't have enough of them. So what are you going to do? Hey, it's first come, first serve. We're going to raise those prices. I mean, look at the housing market right now. You can watch this almost anywhere where if the supply is short and you have willing buyers,
Now we see bidding wars.
somebody's going to pay more money for it. Now, yep, exactly. Now you're in a bidding war. So, these shifts, there's a plethora of factors that can affect all of this, but like changing in consumer preferences, like I talked about production costs, for example. There could be external economic conditions, just ultimately consumer sentiment, or even political or social issues that could come around from messaging on a shirt of some sort. Now that messaging falls out of favor and people just don't want it because of a social issue. So there's just a tremendous amount of things that can affect how that supply and demand really work.
Yeah.
That you
Yeah. That's
ultimately
why.
don't necessarily have control over either, right?
Yeah. That's why the basics are better for this conversation, because this is a very in-depth concept that has basics. This is the starting block. Supply and demand is the starting block for pricing. And then you have a whole slew of factors that join into that impact price, or inflation, deflation, however you want to view price movements. But it all kind of revolves around the supply and demand sun, so to say.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it to me, it's clear that shifts in supply and demand can significantly increase those prices, or impact, I should say, those prices, I guess. Are there other factors, on a simplistic key factors, I guess, I might say that can affect supply and demand curves?
Yeah, kind of, I guess, expanding, so think about income, for example. So the more income you have, so if you're citizens of a country or whatever have an increase in income, well, then there's likely a demand for normal goods or even higher level goods, right? But on the flip side, if people have less money to spend, where do they go? They start to buy the cheaper stuff. So back to the conversation about the FDA and food, right? If you can afford it, you're buying organic, and you're trying to watch that and really buy whole foods. But if you're really struggling financially, I mean, you might be a college kid, right? What did I live off? Wonder Bread and
Ramen
ramen noodles.
noodles.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that was it. And we know it's terrible, but you're like, hey, I found $1 in the
what I can
couch. I can go
afford.
buy 10 packs of ramen noodles. All right, I'm fed for a few days.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. I talked a bit about preferences, consumer sentiment. Right? So if that changes, that can obviously lead to a shift in demand in one sector, but maybe increase demand in another sector. So, and a lot of times companies you can't read the future. So you might come out with something that's very prominent for today's social economic type of situation, but then that shifts, right? And all of a sudden, for whatever reason, society shifts to a different kind of thought pattern, and well, nobody wants your goods anymore. What else? Substitutes and comp. So think about um, increasing in the price of substitute increases demand, where so something that's coming in that might be better, so something that's substituting something else could increase in demand. You see this with software a lot, or I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, where there's a software and you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting, pretty good, but then they come out with all kinds of new features and you're like, wow, that's exactly what I was looking for. Okay, now that increases demand for, but that's across the board. It could be vehicles, really anything.
Okay.
um
Sorry to interrupt you, but
no, you're good.
that to keep picking on Apple with that VR headset at 4,500 today, I say that's insane. But if they came out with a upgraded software, and I don't know a good analogy of what that might be, but let's say I can put this VR headset on and take my children into the classroom, and that's how they're able to learn now. Now my demand at 4,500 actually increases. I'm willing to pay that, because that's my kids in this is a poor example because I'm not a huge fan of this, but if that was their school now, they just put this headset on. We don't have to go to the bus. We don't have to go to an actual classroom. We don't have to pay for that schooling, so on and so forth. Now I'm interested. Now my demand just increased. I'm okay paying 4,500 for it, because the features of it in this new release with increased technology means I will never have to buy another one again, or it lasts 10 years, and there's a whole new slew of ways to use it that are not necessarily video game-ish, but more educational or experience related.
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head, and you think about even just different demographics. So one of the, since we're talking about this headset, and I did this this tutorial or demonstration, if I knew this 16, 17 years ago, if this technology was available, I might have spent the 4,500 knowing now, being, having teenage kids, one's about to go to college, where with this device, you can use your phone, right? And like we take videos of your birthday party or whatever, right? For family memories. And right now that's great. You can look at your pictures and videos. You can put that headset on and be back in that scenario,
Oh,
full, like you're like you never left.
you're
It's
at the
not a
party.
picture, it's you're interacting there. Like they show you a birthday party and it's like, oh, I could reach out and take a piece of cake. I mean, you're right there. So having that moment to be able to go back to, in this kind of sentimental area, I think a lot of parents go through that when your kids are getting ready to leave. You're like, oh my God, it's what happened? It went so fast. To be able to go look at that and cry your eyes out forever,
Where's
would
my
be
baby
worth
gone?
$4,500 to me if I knew at the time. But I think then you look at the demographic and you say, well, a young parent maybe doesn't have $4,500 for one, but isn't really understanding that a picture or a video is fine. I don't need to go back there. But 15, 20 years down the line, you're like, damn, I wish I would have had that technology. I wish I would have bought that. But it just illustrates what we're talking about, right? It's very difficult to figure out. And we talk about substitutes and complements. You're like, look at the iPhone. When the iPhone first came out, everybody bought every new iPhone, like every year. It's like, I have to upgrade, have to upgrade. Nowadays, it's not that important. Some people are still on that. They have to have the new and greatest. But I
Not
now
as many.
go, yeah, I mean, when my phone needs upgrading because the battery doesn't work anymore, then I'll upgrade it. But I don't need one every year. It doesn't change that drastically anymore. Those types of things. Think about expectations for future price, right? So we're in a pretty high inflationary period now, so if you didn't price it right, oh, here's a good example. Bowflex just filed for Chapter 11 or Chapter 11, I think. Anyway,
Not, I don't know.
because during the pandemic, they didn't hit the demand of the pandemic, right? Because who could have foreseen that?
Yeah.
And the lockdowns, but there was this great demand for in-home gyms. Well, they ramped up production too late, and now they're stuck with way too many, whatever they
Well,
produce.
everyone already bought those in-home machines,
Everybody
so
bought them, and so now
they,
they're
they
stuck
didn't
with
buy
all this.
Bowflex because Bowflex didn't have them. They went and bought
Right,
ABC companies, and now Bowflex says, "Hey, we have them." Well, I
right.
already bought my Peloton, so I'm good.
Yeah, and I think I was reading, I mean, they have a buyer, they're trying to get more money, but it's like $35 million is what they're buying, because it's just the overage of supply is really what they're buying. I mean, you think about Bowflex. I mean, I don't know what their value would have been, but have to be over 35 million. I mean, you got to be thinking they were valued at least a few hundred million. I'm just making that up, if not more. Well, it got caught, and
Yeah.
that can happen. So those are production costs, as we talked about. Technology is another thing. I mean, there's just government policies we talked about. Um, they can go on and on, but those are some of the factors that I think are important for people to realize if you're producing, about starting a company, and it's goods and services. I mean, it affects probably goods more so than services, but certainly services can be affected. So you really have got to do your due diligence we talk about, and think about what are the possibles. It's a chess game. We're not playing checkers, right? If you're getting into business and you're thinking you're going to play checkers, just don't even bother, because you really got to be playing chess and trying to figure out, if I make this move, what happens 10 steps down the road, right?
Yeah.
And you can get trapped. And we talk about this all the time. If you make the wrong move and you say, happens to people with jobs, hey, somebody offers you a good paycheck. Okay, I'll take that because it's a good paycheck. Well, did you just get yourself in a trap that you can't get out of? Right. And, you talk to a lot of people. I hate my job. I have to go 9 to 5. Well, okay, the paycheck was there. You went for the trap, And you can't blame anybody but yourself. So even when you're looking for jobs, play chess, right?
Oh,
So sorry, off my
that
you have your pedestal you said you wanted to get on, and I keep getting off mine.
no, you actually led me into a conversation I had. What's today? Friday, Wednesday, with a client where husband and wife both they're in different fields, but both started working. Well, the husband worked for a large company, and the wife got a job. The wife's an attorney. The husband's a like project manager. They both do well, but they both worked at the same company who is struggling right now. And it's a very big company that's IT infrastructure related. And there's issues going on where basically they overextended. They got into a market that they weren't familiar with, and it's hurting them. I was talking to the husband on Wednesday, and he informed me that his wife left the company not because she did not like her job, but they were concerned that they have dual incomes from the same place that might be going down either a sale or bankruptcy path.
Oh,
And if we have layoffs, what happens if both of us get laid off from the same company on the same day or virtually the same time? So they took that fear. The wife left and got a job with a different company. Again, she wasn't unhappy working there. She enjoyed the work. It was basically a business decision for the family of let's spread out so that we don't get hurt because of this.
Mhm.
Now to jump on my pedestal, one of the things that's very prevalent in the news right now that people don't fully grasp relative to supply and demand and leads into kind of your detailed breakdown of it, it's inflation. One thing everyone thinks that inflation is purely hinged on monetary supply. That's the available money in the market is what creates inflation, or the lack of dollars in our economy is what creates deflation. Not as simple as that either. Supply and demand are still the cornerstone of inflation's market economics as well. If you are willing, the housing market,
Okay.
if we reduce monetary supply, that's great. That will help reduce the inflation in the housing market or cost of goods, whatever it may be. It doesn't specifically matter. But if you as a consumer are still willing to pay, and I'll pick on the car market, if you're willing to pay $50,000 for a Honda Accord, guess how much that's going to cost? $50,000. If people stop demanding those because that price is too high, that will help with inflation. If you say no, even though you need a new car, I'm not buying the Accord, and sorry, Honda, didn't mean to pick on you. I have no idea what your cars cost. But if you as the consumer say, I will not pay $50,000 for something that is going to last me 4 years before it starts breaking down, and I drive it off the lot and it's worth 30,000 5 minutes after I paid 50 for it, I'm not doing that. Guess what's going to happen? Honda is going to say, we need to sell some cars.
Yeah.
50, no one's buying them. Let's drop it to 45. If no one's still buying them, let's drop it to 40. Our profits are thinner, but we can still cover it and make some changes there. So that supply and demand is ultimately the cornerstone of economics. Even though there's other factors involved with everything, it still boils down to that. So, since I am casually in the market for a new vehicle, everyone stop buying cars so I can actually afford a car that is reasonable. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. I do not want
Seriously.
a car payment at $1,000 a month. That's
Well,
insane.
it is insane. Isn't that the trap though? Right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, and we've been conditioned, and your grandparents, just like mine, probably told you the same thing. If you can't pay cash for it, you can't afford it, right? So, not to say you should pay cash for a car, only because of the devaluation of kind of products. But yeah, I mean, everybody's on a monthly subscription. So if it fits into my monthly subscription, I don't need to think about how much money I'm actually losing, because my payment's $1,000 a month and I make $50,000 a year, and okay, whatever. Well, you're trapped now, because what happens? You didn't play chess. Oh, I lost my job. I got laid out because we're not in the same world that we were. Companies downsize all the time for profit reasons or for whatever reasons they have, and you're out of a job. They don't care. You're just a worker. And now all of a sudden you've got $1,000 car payment that you owe to a bank. So what are your options? Either continue to pay it and get it repoed, try to hide for a while. I don't know, but be careful of it. Don't go, a lot of these folks, and I get it. You want to look nice. You want to try to impress people. And for some reason in our economy, people think that if you have money, you better, or some reason. That's just not the case. But people overextend themselves for their houses, for their cars. And if you get into trouble, you got nowhere to go. It's a checkers move.
It's beyond that for me personally. It's, to me, that weighs into my decisions, but it's also value. It's funny. I was having a conversation with my dad about the price of something, and he offered to pay for it, and I kind of scolded him, and I said, Dad, it's not about the money. I can pay for it. I can afford it. And to hit on that car example, it wasn't a car, but let's pretend it was. I might be able to afford $1,000 per month of a car payment. I have that free cash flow, and my job is stable, so on and so forth. So that's not specifically the concern. For me, that car is not worth $1,000 per month to me. And if it is to you, great, have at it. To me, the value is not there. And I mean, I wasn't rude to my dad, but basically I was very blunt. I said, it's not about who's paying for it. I don't want you to pay for it because it is not worth that.
Mm-hmm.
That this, and I forget what it was off the top of my head, but let's call it $5,000 for whatever, or 50 grand to pave my driveway. That is not worth it. The value of my current driveway to repave it is not worth $50,000 to me. 5,000? Yes, all day.
Yeah.
That's worth it for me to redo my driveway so my kids can play basketball, whatever the reasons are. But that 50,000 number is not. And when I said, can you believe this is X dollars? My dad said, well, if you want, I'll help you out with it. And thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes.
But that's not the issue. It's not paying for it. It's, why would I pay for it? That is not worth that to me.
Yep. Yeah, there's 1,000 examples of that. It's especially right now, it's crazy. But again, since there's 1,000 examples, we could be here for a couple of days.
Yeah, let's jump into garlic.
Yes. What do we have coming up? The great garlic.
We got the great garlic price hike in China.
Perfect. Let's get back to it. Or let's talk about that when we get back.
Sounds good. Best Ever Granola is a woman-owned, Pittsburgh-based company specializing in small-batch, gluten-free, and vegan granola. They rely on the power of simple ingredients: organic gluten-free rolled oats, pure PA maple syrup, organic unrefined cold-pressed coconut oil, and a variety of raw nuts and seeds. It is, well, the best ever. Find their original dark chocolate chia, as well as seasonal offerings at over 90 retailers regionally. Best Ever Granola is not affiliated with LPL Financial or the Monteverdi Group.
All right, Ryan, we've talked about a lot today. It's very interesting, I think. Even the supply and demand, a lot of people might read that on the episode and be like, I don't want to know about supply and demand, but I think it was a pretty good conversation that we had. But now we're into the mayhem of the great garlic price hike in China. It's pretty fascinating. case of supply and demand dynamics, right? And how this all works, leading to an extreme price volatility. So can you explain what happened during this pretty unusual time?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and it does fold into the supply and demand. Back in 2009, 2010, the background of this, China is the world's largest producer of garlic. It's responsible for about 80% of the global supply. Little known fact:
I didn't really realize that. Really?
China can grow garlic. I can't. I
Jeez.
tried
I
last year.
can't.
It it, it was sad. But in 2008, the garlic market was relatively stable, but then two major events disrupted supply and demand. On the supply side, in 2008, bacterial wilt disease affected the garlic crops. Maybe that's what happened in mine. We'll pretend that's what it was. It's not
Yes.
that I can't grow anything. So this disease affected the crops in Shandong, which is China's largest garlic producing province, and it reduced the supply significantly, as you would expect. Now, at the same time, or generally around the same time, H1N1, if you remember that, aka the swine flu pandemic, that hit, and rumors spread that garlic could help prevent infection. So what happens when everyone's scared of getting swine flu because I don't want to turn into a pig? And that's what people thought swine flu meant. So the belief that garlic could help prevent it, let's go.
This
Apparently,
reminds me a little bit of toilet paper.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very similar to the toilet paper issue. So there was a sudden spike in demand. Everybody wanted it. So now we create a bubble. Sensing an opportunity, speculators, just like with the toilet paper, I can't think of a good funny comment for the toilet paper issues of 2020. Speculators began hoarding garlic, which, with the decreased demand because of that wilt disease, what happens? Prices skyrocketed. The price per kilogram of garlic rose from about 0.4 yuan to over 6 yuan. That is an increase of more than 1,500% in just a few months.
Jeez.
Yes. So garlic became known as white gold. And some traders even stored garlic in bank vaults. How insane is that?
That's I mean, likely scenarios that it evens out. I mean, we haven't got to what happens next, but I'm just thinking ahead. So, okay.
Likely scenario, yes, but speculators, greed,
Yep.
interest, and lack of forethought. If I see the price going up 500%, I got to get me some of that. I'll hold on to it and sell it once it goes over 1,000%. Same thing over 1,500. And then the correction occurs, the bubble, or the bubble bursts. And that's what occurs here as expected. Supply began to recover. Demand spike subsided because we found out that swine flu is not like vampires and garlic isn't the end all be all for it. So the demand subsided and the garlic bubble bursts. Prices plummeted, leaving many of those speculators with very large quantities of garlic that nobody wanted for the price they were willing to sell it. So the sudden collapse resulted in significant financial losses for traders and farmers who had overinvested in garlic.
Of course. Right? I mean, that it's the same story over and over again. You can, how many parallels can you make to this the garlic disaster of China? I mean, it happens. You can look at any bubble; it's basically the same thing. Or you look at crypto and just, oh, it's going up. We got to buy. Nobody has any idea what it is. And why?
Matter.
Why?
Show
So
up, buy
garlic,
it.
right? You got a crop. Okay, 80%. You got this whole thing. Okay, you got one, and I'm sure it's monocrop agriculture. So It's not, you got the same crop, you probably take some, you lose 30, whatever the percentage was, but it's going to recover. So don't always just follow the increase. If you can time it right, but we know timing the market never really works. And if you're lucky, it might work out because you hear those stories like in Amazon. Like, I bought Amazon when they were low. Now I'm a multi-billionaire, but it's not
How many
that
people
likely
are
to happen.
buying Bowflex?
Right.
Like you hit that example earlier.
Yep.
Bowflex is the same thing. They couldn't meet the demand, so they ramped up their supply in order to do so, but it was too late.
Too late. Yep. Well, I mean, it's obviously the garlic pricing is unbelievable.
Mhm.
From just, if garlic's that expensive, eventually you just don't use garlic, right? I mean, you just say, I'm not going
One
to cook.
would
What
think.
do you use garlic for? I mean, I know that people use it for a lot of things, but primarily I have to assume it's cooking.
Yeah.
And okay, you could get, maybe it's not as good. I love garlic. Garlic's great. But could I use a shallot instead for a little while until the prices come down? So what broader lessons what broader lessons can be learned from the great garlic price hike?
All right. I'd say the first biggest key lesson that we have, Adri, is that we can't seem to learn from history
Yeah.
and we allow it to keep repeating itself, which is actually a true lesson is the psychology.
Yeah.
And that's what I actually inadvertently mean by we can't learn our lessons. The rapid price increase was fueled by speculation and rumors, which that just shows how market sentiment can drive extreme volatility. You throw reason out of the window and logic. To your point, don't use garlic in your cooking. Use some salt, use some shallots. There's other options available instead of just continuing after it and fueling to that demand. But the psychology is you see the shiny thing, you see it going up, somebody says how much money they made in it, you want to get on board of that. So the psychology behind it is you do. Then eventually it's a game of what's the game with music and chairs?
Musical chairs.
Wow. Whew. Friday.
Oh,
The game with music and chairs called musical chair. Thank you very much, sir.
that's right.
Eventually, the music stops and somebody's left standing holding the bag. And that happens. Next lesson is supply chain vulnerability, which that's what we saw. A lot of people didn't know what supply chain meant until the most recent pandemic in 2020, when, oops, now we understand what supply chain is. So the vulnerability to it is a single disruption, like the bacterial disease affecting the crops, can have far-reaching effects on the global supply chains. Another key thing, diversification. It's a weird word. Our listeners probably haven't heard that out of our mouths to date. But when you're speculating, if you put all their money into garlic, you're going to suffer significant losses when that bubble bursts. So diversifying your investments can help you mitigate risks like that. Accurate information and the importance of having that. So the rumor that the garlic can help with swine flu was all it was. It wasn't fact. So relying on rumors that instead of accurate information, that can lead to poor investment decisions. Always verify your sources, verify the information, make sure you know that it's not just somebody saying it and it's actually true, which is getting increasingly harder in today's
I
day
was
and
just going to
age.
say, in today's world, it's most important to really dig through any information. Just don't take information as any fact. Just use it as data, no matter what it is. It's just data, and then parse through it as you can and come up with the most likely scenario. I mean, I think that's as best as we can do today because it's so hard to figure out what's fact and versus fiction versus misleading versus bias. So you got to go through all of it and come to your own conclusion. And I think that's all we can do. Sorry.
Yeah, it's not easy. A lot of people don't want to take the time because it is time intensive. It's hard, but it's your money. If you're going to be making an investment, you really should know what you're investing in. and know the finite details, or someone that you trust implicitly, that you know is going to do that. But always check,
Mhm.
always look at it. I think the final lesson of or focus that we can have on what happened here is regulation and oversight. So the lack of oversight allowed for people to hoard garlic toilet paper back in 2020, which exacerbated the situation. And I will say we did kind of learn, and I don't know if you remember, but there was signs on I think every storefront back when COVID hit, toilet paper limit two per
Yeah.
person or two per whatever the sign was. That, and that was oversight from the stores. That wasn't regular. That was Sam's Club saying, "Look, we can't.
Yeah.
You can't come in here and buy 50 massive containers of toilet paper. You can only buy two." So effective regulation could have prevented or mitigated this, saying, no, you cannot buy up all the garlic and store it in bank vaults. That's a no. That could have helped this situation.
And on the flip side too, when you think, we were talking about government and government oversight, and sometimes what we, it seems more so right now, and hopefully it fixes eventually. When you have a wider distrust of the government, primarily from the, whether it's nefarious or not, so that's not really the reason or the the issue. It's consumer sentiment, right? If your government is overstepping too much, and you're watching this from afar or even up close, and you're asking questions like, again, how do you come out of government with hundreds of millions of dollars? Doesn't make any sense. So there's something going on here. Now you have a distrust of the government. So now if the government starts to regulate things, consumer sentiment goes, oh, it's they're
Why?
trying to regulate garlic because they know it is, and they're trying to push, the new shot or whatever drugs they want to push to help this. We know garlic works. So this becomes a spiraling out of control. So the role of the government, going back to Adam Smith's examples, should be minimal, right? And in doing the right thing, and being part of helping the citizens grow, and not overstepping those bounds, because you don't want to have a distrust in the government because of these kind of reasons, right? So, and everything gets out of hand, and now you have all this information that you can't parse through, because who has the time to really go through every single issue? And we're just left there going, who do you trust, right? So,
Yeah.
and a lot of people like to be part of their group, and so they just latch on to what other people say that are part of their group, and they as fact. And usually, neither side has any facts, and everybody's just kind of now pointing their fingers at citizens, then start pointing them fingers at each other, which you don't want in a country. And I feel like we're kind of headed down that road, which is a little bit certainly unfortunate, and I don't want to say scary, but concerning.
It's very concerning. I would absolutely agree with that. And I mean, the example that came to mind as you were saying that was from the COVID response, which, quite frankly, that was a Mack truck coming down the street. Nobody saw it coming. It came and smacked us in the face. So I'm not saying anyone did anything wrong per se in the response to that, but thinking of the mistrust of government or the mistrust of everything, I go back to the whole ivermectin thing of when that came out as a possible solution or band-aid for COVID, and the government, the media is saying absolutely not, that's crazy, you need the vaccine. And then now we're seeing more data coming out now that they've had time, and saying, well, actually that may have been a better solution than the vaccine or whatnot. Now it's, well, I don't trust what I read or hear any longer.
Mhm.
So that creates the next time something like this happens, and the government said, or the don't wear masks don't help you. And my personal viewpoint on that, they said that knowing it was incorrect, but they said it so that they could control the supply of it, and not run out for the medical professionals who absolutely needed it at that time. So they did deceive us at that moment in time, but I think there was a good reason for it. The way they did it, I'm not saying was correct or not, but that leads us, whenever they say something, to think the opposite. Just like you said, why are they doing this?
Yeah.
If they come in and say, no, it's garlic doesn't help it. Actually, this vaccine from Pfizer is what will help with swine flu. Garlic does absolutely nothing. A lot of people in society are going to say, go buy garlic. They're saying it's not because they want to push something else, because there's a lobbyist that funded them and is going to make billions of dollars. So you're going to do the opposite of what they're saying.
Yeah.
And I think that mistrust is, especially from our government standpoint, number one is past performance and seeing that and seeing the outcomes. And number two is the laws in place, that the fact that you can have lobbyists. I mean,
That's
I
crazy.
view lobbyists as legalized bribery. I'm allowed to buy you stuff and bribe you to influence your law passing or voting on laws, and the American public knows that now.
Yeah.
So every time you vote for something, well, why are you doing that?
Right.
Did someone just write you a really large check into your campaign financial bucket, and that's why you're saying do this, or is it because it's what's good for me?
Right.
And people don't know anymore.
They
So
don't. And
go
yeah,
ahead.
no, I agree. And it's, and we're talking about the government again. We could be here all day. We should probably start to wrap it up. But it's like they don't even care anymore. Like when a corporation gets caught doing something bad, usually they come out and be like, okay, I'm sorry. There's distrust in the corporation. They know they need to fix it. They go ahead and do what they need to do to make it right by the consumer, right? Because they have to please the consumer. And, the government, I mean, supposedly should be there for us and need to please us. It's like they don't care anymore. They're just blatant as could be about all of this. They're like, yeah, we get paid. Of course we do.
Yep.
And what are you going to do about it? And you're
Yeah.
like, well,
And it's both sides. That's
yeah.
non-political.
Oh, it's
That is
not, yeah,
both sides of it.
nonpartisan, not
Yeah.
saying, anything. No, it's the whole thing. And it just sucks. And
Yeah.
that we're in this, and I don't see any way out, because ultimately, like I said at the very beginning, human greed tends to float to the top. And we've watched this throughout history. And I was just reading about, I don't know if it's true, about George Washington. And it was, I forget, Hancock and maybe Adams, but they were, they wanted to basically form what is now the Democrats and Republicans. I forget what they were called back then. And he was like, no, don't do it, because all you're going to do is cause infighting. You're going to allow external
Division.
division and external influence from other countries is going to creep in there. And whether that is correct, I don't know. I didn't research it from a historical standpoint, but the point
I've
is
heard the
very
same
clear.
thing as well. I
Yeah,
haven't researched it either, but I've heard the same thing. And
but the sentiment is
I
correct.
wholeheartedly agree with that.
Right.
Why do we have two political parties? Why can't you, if you're running for a political office, why can't you just tell me what you believe in? Why do you have to be a Republican, a Democrat, an independent? Everyone should be an independent.
Yeah.
Here's my platform. I believe in A, B, C, D, and E. And they can cross parties,
Right.
or the current parties. There should be no parties, is
It should
my
be
point.
no.
Why are we creating clubs to fight each other? It's absolutely insane to me that this is the system that we have, and we say, yes, this is democracy. I'm
Yeah.
not
No.
allowed, and I know I'm allowed to vote on the opposite side of my political party, but if I'm a Democrat, I have to vote for Democrats, or I'm supposed to vote for Democrats only, just because they have a D in front of their or behind their name.
Yeah.
And if I'm a Republican, I'm supposed to vote Republican. Why? How about I
I
vote
see.
for you because I like what you think?
Right.
And if you're a Democrat, why can't you believe in? I'll pick abortion because that's such a divisive issue. If you're a Democrat, socially liberal, but maybe you believe in abortion still or don't, belief in abortion, I should say, as a Democrat. That's okay to me. I may not vote for you personally because of that, but that's your prerogative. You don't have to say, I'm a Democrat, so therefore abortion should be legal, or I'm a Republican, so it should not. Why? How
It's
about just
foolish.
say, I believe X?
Right. And it's foolish. And it
Simple
does
as that.
and maybe it's designed on purpose because division seems to be good for distraction. I don't know. But you're absolutely right. And, it's unfortunate that so many people don't think about things, right? So, you could look at Joe Biden or Donald Trump just because they're the two presidents that we have now. Well, a lot of Republicans go, I hate Joe Biden. And a lot of Democrats say, I hate, Trump. And you have reasons, I get on both sides, why you might not like certain parts of people's personalities or their policies or whatever. Completely understand it. But it's not an all or nothing thing, right? You
Yes.
don't need to take the whole package. You say, I don't like what this person did in this, or this person said at this time. Okay, well, what he did over here was pretty interesting, and I kind of like that, and I didn't like this. But it's everybody's just playing checkers, and it's you're not on my side, so I hate you, and it's not good for anybody. It's not good for communication. We all should just have open communication, and if you find yourself being biased to one side, get rid of your biases, right? I mean, think about when you're talking about information and your mind is drawn to one way, realize that your mind is drawn that way, and implement some tactics within yourself to open yourself up to all the information, use it as data, make the reasonable choice. Again, on my high horse, but I'll get back because we're at about 1:20 and we should probably start wrapping it up.
No, you're good. I agree with you. To me, debate is very healthy. Hearing you and I think differently on a decent amount of issues. I love our conversations because if I say A and you say, well, I think B, I don't say, well, you're an idiot and I hate you. I say, why?
Yeah, don't
And
dig your
then you
heels in.
explain that to me, and I might hear that and say, you know what, that's a good point, actually. I hadn't considered that. So my viewpoint can change. But if you just come out and say, you're an absolute idiot for thinking A, I don't even know why I talked to you. Okay, well, I'm not going to talk to you then. And we're done. Your viewpoint's B, my viewpoint's A. We hate each other.
Right.
As simple as that.
And it's fine to disagree.
Productive for no one.
Yeah. And you don't need to agree with everybody, but talk to people and take their insights and go ahead and I can try to understand their perspective, because your perspective is not the only perspective. I'm just talking generally to everybody, so
yes.
Try to understand.
Information is power.
Yes.
And that's the same thing with these stories. These stories we tell in the podcasts that we put out, they highlight the power of market dynamics, number one, and two, the importance of making informed decisions. And we're tailored to navigating the financial markets, but it's in everything. It's not just in the financial markets. Learn, educate yourself. Base an opinion off of factual information, not something I saw on X last night.
Right.
That may be true. It might not. Right. I don't know. So do the research, think about it, and create your own decisions, not just, well, Adri Blyer said this, and I like Adri Blyer, so I agree the same way. Not on everything.
No, of course not. You shouldn't. And it's your point is perfect. It's always fun talking about this stuff, and I hope our listeners, at least, get something out of it and, the lessons. So I think today was a good show, pretty interesting topics, Ryan. And of course, to our listeners, we look forward to bringing you more stories that uncover this very intricate world of finance and everything that's involved with it. So thanks for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Have fun.
The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. There is no assurance that the techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for all investors or will yield positive outcomes. The purchase of certain securities may be required to effect some of the strategies. Investing involves risks including possible loss of principal. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC.